Have you ever thought about why you had the games that you did when you were a kid? I've been buying back all of the games that I had in childhood, and looking at some of them I can explain, some of them I cannot. A few that I can, and that I'm glad that I actually think I ended up keeping this one. I think I did not sell this one, but this is Battle Clash. This is an amazing game for the Super Scope. I had a Super Scope when I was a kid, or I should be more specific and say that my dad bought a Super Scope because, you know, he's into marksmanship. If you're not familiar with it, it's a Nintendo developed game. I don't see Nintendo ever making a game like this or its sequel, but we'll talk about that later. It is probably the best Super Scope game for the system. It's got these big, beautiful sprites of sort of like Gundam looking characters that you just blast away with the Super Scope. It's got great music, the characters are really fun and really great looking, and just the artwork in general really blows me away. And it's kind of a shame that we really haven't gotten a good Metal Combat / Battle Clash game since these games came back out in the early 1990s. Another Super Scope game that I think I just had Super Scope games because my dad bought them so that we could play them. This one is Bazooka Blitzkrieg. Now, what makes Bazooka Blitzkrieg special? Well, I think what's interesting about all of these Super Scope games that I'll talk about over the course of a couple videos is the fact that you don't actually shoot people. You shoot, in this case, Gundams, so robots. In this game, you shoot humanoid robots. They look like people, they move like people, there are some helicopters, but you just blast them. Video game adaptations of cultural properties usually get a bad rap, especially when they're produced before, say, like the year 2000. But I have a couple of games, and this I actually held on to. I kept my copy of Stargate. Yes, Stargate, the big movie from like 1994 or 1995. I am a huge fan of both Stargate movie as well as Stargate SG-1 and the whole franchise. But there was actually a Stargate video game that came out on the Super Nintendo. It's a very quick play. I think you can finish it in like 2 hours. So we're going to be going through a lot of caves, which can be frustrating at times, especially when you have to find all the pieces of the nuclear bomb, because if you don't, you can beat the final boss and then the game laughs at you and says, "You fool, you didn't collect all the pieces of the nuclear bomb? Well, that means Ra is still alive, spoiler alert. Oh, and you didn't get all of the symbols to dial home through the gate? Well, I guess you're stuck on Abydos forever, sucker." Another adaptation that I have in my childhood library is The Rocketeer. My dad loves the Rocketeer franchise. I've talked about his love of the comic books and the movie specifically in a separate video. I do not recommend The Rocketeer, the game, because it is very boring. It can be tough. I actually managed to clear this in a couple of hours. And I think this was originally like a computer game and it got ported to the Super Nintendo. But no, I don't think anyone should really play this game. Do people like Donkey Kong? I'm not sure, because I've been, listening to a lot of podcasts. I've been reading people talk about games on the internet for a very long time. And one game in particular seems to have drawn a lot of controversy, and that is the original Donkey Kong. I loved this when I was a kid. I loved playing as Diddy Kong and Donkey Kong and like taking out K. Rool and jumping on all these crocodiles, and the action platforming was to die for. Oh, here's another Super Scope game. So this is one that I did not sell. I held on to this and Stargate, and I think Super Mario World that we'll talk about in a moment. But it is Super Scope 6. This is also like actually kind of mind-blowing in how good it is. It's really just a shooting gallery. It is 6 games, but really it's 2. There's the one game where you're playing like Tetris. You're playing different versions of Tetris where you shoot these cubes and either you blow up the cubes or you rotate the cubes to get to the color that you want. That I didn't like as much, mostly because I'm not very good at Tetris. The other game that is very good is a shooting gallery where either you're shooting missiles that are coming across the screen or you're shooting at alien spacecraft that are coming at you. Those were really fun, and I think combined with Battle Clash, I think the Super Scope is a very underrated light gun accessory for a console. Yes, PlayStation had things like Time Crisis, but Super Scope 6 for the Super Nintendo, this was actually bundled with the Super Scope itself, which thank God I held on to. I sold my controller for my Super Nintendo, but I kept the Super Scope? What was I thinking? Let's talk about Mario for a moment. To me, Mario begins with Super Mario World. This may be controversial, but as a younger millennial, the Super Nintendo was my first console, and my first experience with Mario was Super Mario World. I see it as the definitive template for 16-bit graphics. It's actually kind of insane that they launched with Super Mario World, and then, they could have just packed it up. Now, I wonder why my parents would have bought me Super Mario AllStars when I was 5 or 6 years old. Probably because I liked playing Super Mario World so much that, they just go down to the Walmart or was Target around back then? I have no idea. But I'm guessing they saw how much I was playing Super Mario World, and then they decided to get me Super Mario AllStars. I didn't have access to video game magazines back then. I was barely able to read at that age. If Super Mario World wasn't bad, Super Mario All-Stars couldn't have been bad either. When I picture the traditional foundational 8-bit Mario, I'm picturing the remakes that were put onto this cartridge. The last game that I want to talk about in this video, and the final game that was a part of my childhood collection, is Stunt Race FX. Now, it sort of uses the same, I'm guessing, technology that Star Fox does. You can tell from the way the polygons are laid out, the 3D-ness of it all, and also from the very slow and choppy frame rate. I don't know why I would have either asked my parents for this or why they would have given this to me. I'm guessing it's because the cars have eyes on them, and so it's okay, yeah, that's cute. That's our 5-year-old can play this. Why not this instead of Gran Turismo? I did not appreciate the Super Nintendo in my childhood. And you know how I could prove that? The fact that I sold most of these games when I transitioned over to the N64. If I could go back in time, I would tell myself, you fool, what you need to do is you need to hold on to all of these games that you had when you were a kid, and instead, what you need to do is go and buy more Super Nintendo games. 2D is gonna look great. 3D isn't going to look good for another couple generations. Don't worry about it. The N64 games will be there when you want them. Instead, I should have been collecting Super Nintendo games. And what we'll talk about in the next video is going to prove that the Super Nintendo is one of the best consoles ever made. And I've got the games here to prove it. I have been your man out of Japan, Jay Contra. Thanks for watching, and mahalo.